Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of Heathen Talk. Today we're going to talk about the 9 noble virtues. And Lauren, go ahead with telling people where they can find us.
All right. Well, first of all, want to let you guys know that we are easy to reach. You can find us on Facebook. We are at facebook.com/Heathen Talk.
Real quick,
Yeah,
Lauren, you got to
Torrent
do
is
something
not.
about the
Yeah.
background music.
I'm sorry.
All right, we are at facebook.com/Heathen Talk. We're also available on Twitter at Heathen_talk. YouTube, if you're watching us right now, then you know that we're on youtube.com/Heathen Talk. And of course, you can always email us at heathen.talk.podcast@gmail.com. And the reason we want you to get a hold of us right now is because we have started a new thing where we are going to be announcing gatherings and asking for events, and it's going to be really exciting to be able to get the word out about all of these events. And we were kind of inspired by this because of some last-minute events some people are trying to put together to replace an event that's been canceled, and we really do want to help get the word out. The only requirement for events is that it doesn't violate kind of the ethics of us. We're not going to promote your Nazi true white socialist gathering, but beyond that, we're open-minded. Fascist, white fascist, what?
So, in that
National
vein,
socialist. I was going with the Nazis. I don't know. I've been at school all day, y'all. Y'all are lucky I'm upright.
this is actually fair warning. We have all been crazy busy this week, so we may be a bit off our game.
We may be a little punch drunk this week, or drunk. You never know.
So what you mean is we've dropped from single A down to backyard?
Probably, at least for one episode.
I would say that we're strongly in Little League.
Oh, well, somebody took away our tea then.
All right. So, I guess it's my turn. So, in light of Lightning Across the Plains being canceled, which I know plenty of people were sad about, and I know there are other gatherings being put together for this, we did have one person from the subreddit, username is Etheric, I think is how it's pronounced, and he has decided to put together a camp moot held in Macon, Missouri at the Long Branch State Park. If you look in the description of this video, there are links. He has an email set up. They will be camping on September 25th until noon September 27th. You need to go to the camp website, which again is in the link in the description box of this video, and register with the campsite. They are going to hold a pub moot at the local bar, so if you're planning on doing that, you got to bring some cash and be over 21. Speaking of pub moots.
No, we're not off our game at all. We're going to be holding one up here in the Seattle area this weekend. It's kind of a last-minute planned thing. It's largely being put on by The Troth, and it's going to be at Brower's Cafe in Fremont at 4 o'clock. So if anybody happens to be in the Seattle area or feels the need to drive that far to get to a pub moot, we will be there. Everybody's welcome, and we'd love to see you.
So, on that note, I know, Lauren, you're going to take this week's toast,
Yes.
but we did tell our viewers that we would tell them what we're drinking.
Yes.
Tonight, I am drinking Vanilla Otis, which is an oatmeal stout infused with vanilla by Ninkasi Brewery out of Eugene, Oregon.
And I am drinking Roman Lapdog Brown. It's a Northern English brown I made myself, and it's delicious, and it's named in honor of people like Josh and Mark, those Roman Lapdogs.
I am not a Roman lapdog. I'm an asshole.
It's the same thing.
Don't make me come up there.
I'm hoping you do.
Lauren, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking the finest of boxed wine. And I've been kind of, it's funny, this is the week we were going to do this, and this is what I have in the house. So, it is Boda Box, which is not anything foo-foo or fancy, but it is, in my opinion, one of the better lower-end wines. And quite frankly, I don't drink wine fast enough to, be able to go through a bottle, so it lasts a pretty good while. So, if you want to be an Arkansas heathen like me, box wine, let me tell you. No, actually, they'd probably they're all going to shoot me when they hear that.
And just so you guys know, because he has to put up with all of you while we do this, our producer is just drinking bullet bourbon straight from the bottle.
Can't blame him.
I can't either, no.
So, Lauren, who are we toasting this week?
So, we have a very great person and program we're going to be toasting. And the person that we are going to be toasting this week is Rob L. Schreiber. He is the head of the Inreach Heathen Prison Services, and their kind of goal is to provide religious information, materials, visitation, and correspondence to people who are in correctional facilities, transitional houses, halfway houses, and mental health facilities. So they're trying to reach out and help people get good information on heathenry in places where that may not be available due to certain prison politics or bad chaplains. That's been my experience as well with some of this. But he also is the founder, and one of the founders of the Pennsylvania Dutch, which I'm not going to try to pronounce because I will butcher it.
I believe it's Erglawa.
Thank you. Tradition of heathenism in the United States. So he's really done a lot, and I know him virtually online, and he's really done a lot for the heathen community and puts a lot of work into developing curriculums and getting books and grabbing books. And I want to put this plug out there for him, but if you were in the Philadelphia area this weekend, they are doing a book drive at Philadelphia Pagan Pride, September 5th, so it's this weekend. And the drop-off spot's going to be in the Gravel Circle. I guess people there who know, but one of the things they really need are copies of pretty much any translation of the Poetic and the Prose Edda. So definitely, if you have that and you happen to be there, they would really like your donations, or you can always reach out to them. We'll have a link up to their website in the show notes. But a great group. I'm, in fact, about to send them a big box of books I can no longer see anymore. So, to Rob and to his people at Inreach who are putting in the work. Hail.
So, there was also a nasty rumor going around that we were going to have a Cascadia moot announcement on this episode.
Oh God, I hope not.
I don't know what those Cascadian guys were thinking, but that's kind of bad. In that vein, though, there is going to be this get-together thing that goes on. Where's it going on?
It's a place called Granite Falls in Washington. It's a little bit north of Seattle. It was one of the finalists on our list of sites we chose to do for it, and honestly, we went there because it's very well known to me. It's very beautiful, and it was half the price of one of the other spots we were choosing. It's a campground. It's on a river. It's covered in trees. There will be facilities there as well. So it's just one of my favorite places in the entire Cascadian region to go.
And so when we do this thing, we're going to have some workshops that go on. Registered attendees, they get meals, right? We are doing that?
We are doing meals. Actually, what we're shooting for is to at least one of the 2 nights. It's going to be a weekend affair, by the way. Camping or sleeping in the lodge both nights. And we're hoping one of those nights, if we get sufficient interest, to actually have me spend all my time roasting wild boar.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want wild boar?
It's delicious.
Now, I do want to stress that if you are in the area or if you feel like you want to come out to this event, we do need at least 20 people to go to our GoFundMe and register for the event.
If we don't get 20 people to pre-register, we simply cannot afford it. So we cannot stress enough how important it is that we get this. It's going to be something we can't do if people are planning on showing up and paying at the gate.
And just so there's no confusion, go to gofundme.com/Cascadia moot. Registration is $50. That gets you meals, possibly boar, workshops, and you get to hang out with us. Who doesn't want that?
And we've got a lot of other stuff planned that we're not going to tell you until you actually register, and we have sufficient interest in it before we actually tell you about them.
And come on, guys, I am flying in from Arkansas, so anyone who's anyone who's any closer than Arkansas has no excuse, and I'm blind.
No excuse whatsoever.
I am getting the link to the GoFundMe page on the Facebook page right now, so go over there right now. You only need 19 people now, though, so that's all.
So Cascadian Heathens, think about that. The blind host from Arkansas is flying all the way to Cascadia to shame you into coming to this event.
Exactly.
Well, and we all know it's a plague within heathenry at large that people just don't want to drive 2 hours to go to an event. We are telling you that we're going to put on an event that is half the price of other events, and all you got to do is show up. Just go register and show up.
Pretty much. Okay, we're sounding entirely too much like an NPR fund drive. I think we should move on.
I will say this much, though. You guys, I mean, you're talking about 2 hours to go to events, and that's, like, the norm for me. That is absolutely not, like, 3 hours is pretty much, that's a state event for me. Y'all are wussies.
Well.
No, we're civilized. We have things close to us to do, and we don't have to drive 30 minutes up yonder holler just to get a beer.
Hey, I don't have to drive up yonder holler to get a beer. I can go to the K. Roger right up here.
Right up yonder down the creek.
Yep.
Right.
Actually, that is kind of true. It is right down the creek. Anyway.
It's a ways.
The link for Cascadia Moot, as your social media maven, the link for Cascadia Moot is up on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Heathen Talk. So go out there and register and make Torrent happy. He needs it.
And if you have any questions, you guys know where to ask them. And remember, the more of you that sign up, the more special perks will be revealed about what you're going to get when you get there.
It's true. So, as we transition, this is my awesome segue, from Cascadia Moot to the 9 Noble Virtues.
Masterful.
I want to start out with saying that we got some feedback on the Facebook, and people that responded seemed to like the 9 Noble Virtues, which is a thing. That said, you're going to find that our opinions may differ. Even within ourselves, we may dislike them for different reasons.
I just want to say that from a surface glance, they seem like a pretty good idea. And being someone who that was very steeped in kind of the things that were happening when I was a baby heathen, I really didn't start thinking critically about them until I met you guys, because they are still very much a thing here in the wastelands, as Torrent would refer to it, in the I would say the South and the Midwest. So I just want to say to everybody listening who thinks, you know, I'm not trying to be critical of you because I've been there, but I do think that we need to, as heathenry, and not only that, as heathens individually, take a critical look and really examine this.
Right, and I want to stress that this show is not being critical of people who hold with the Nine Noble Virtues and believe they're a good thing. This show is being critical specifically of the Nine Noble Virtues themselves. I have good friends that still cling to them and believe that they are a good thing, and we disagree, and that's okay. But I also want to ask those of you that do consider them to be a good thing, those that do consider them to be things to live by, to at least listen to this episode with an open mind about the subject, and let us tell you why it is that we have a problem with them and why we felt the need to devote an episode to discussing what those problems are.
So, before we get any further into that, you two have been heathens longer than I have.
And you're doing it wrong by that virtue.
Well, naturally. But you're not the boss of me.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, Lauren, where did the Nine Noble Virtues come from? What's a brief history of the Nine Noble?
Well, okay, so let's start out with the fact that you want to say which version of the Nine Noble Virtues. Because there are two different versions. You have the one that most people are going to be the most familiar with are going to be the Nine Noble Virtues that are single words. Those came from John Yole and John Gibbs Bailey, who were members or the founders of the Odinic Rite back in the 1970s. There is another version which has been put out by the AFA, which is similar, but not, it's in, I would argue that it is somewhat in the same spirit, but worded differently.
As I've always heard, the AFA's version was basically made to make them more understandable.
Right.
Where the single word versions would be easy to interpret in whatever hell the way you wanted to. The AFA was trying to nail them down a bit and make them more solid.
Right. And then there's also, from that, there was also one other, and I apologize because it's not as widely used and known. There was also the Sixfold Goal, which was put out also around that same time period by Stephen Flowers, Edward Thorson. Once again, that one is really fallen out of. The only time I ever hear that ever brought up is in discussions about the Nine Noble Virtues. So it's pretty much fallen out of, I would say, general knowledge even.
It's part of the history lesson.
Yes. But I did want to add that in there so that we were comprehensive. I am trying to be at least presenting of all sides.
If we're gonna hate on something, we got to do it in a fair fashion.
Well,
exactly.
In that fair vein, as I was telling you guys before the show, I never got into the Nine Noble Virtues when I moved into heathenry in my life. I managed to avoid that train. But when I started doing research for the show, I myself got confused because I just Googled them and found a wiki, and there were two different versions, and one of them wasn't even the AFA's version, the modern AFA. It was the Asatru Free Assembly's version, which was different than what the Asatru Folk Assembly puts out.
Right. The Asatru Free Assembly, for those of you who don't know your heathen history, is the predecessor organization to not only the Asatru Folk Assembly, but also the Troth. And there was a split there in the early 80s, and they split into two separate organizations. So that was kind of a piece that came, the one that you found up there was kind of a piece that came from the history of both, which are, I would say, the two larger heathen organizations in the United States.
And definitely the two most impactful at the moment.
Right. So I think before we start digging into the individual virtues, I think it would be good to discuss, the impacts that they've had on heathenry, both positive, well, mostly positive, I would say, as far as how people think of them, before we start getting into the negatives.
Well, I think that's important as well. I know from conversations I've had with my kinfolk and other local heathens, they tend to use the Nine Noble Virtues as bullet points, as ways to impart heathen worldview on children or new heathens in an easily digestible fashion.
Right. I've also heard it used as an elevator speech, if you will. For those of you that don't know how a lot of us use that term, it's, hey, what's your religion? Oh, I'm a heathen. What's that? Then you have to have the elevator speech prepared to explain to them without going into paragraphs and books worth of detail what your religion is.
Well, the idea that the elevator speech is a speech you could give while on an elevator with someone.
Right.
I will say that from someone who comes at this from looking at this from more of kind of my previous professional life, we live in a culture, an overculture, where there is very dogmatic religious. If you want to know what a Christian believes, or someone who's Judeo-Christian, you can point to the Ten Commandments. You can point to these things that are easily written in articles and put on as graphics when you talk about it on TV, and that I think has been theoretically that kind of because we live in this overculture that is super influenced by instead of being I'm sorry, I completely lost my train of thought there. As we are in like I said, we're in a society that likes our rules.
Well, and beyond that,
yeah.
if I may, as Torrent likes to say, you were born Christian and so was I.
Yeah.
And Christianity is very much predicated on the Ten Commandments. And we all learn them as kids in Sunday school. We all have some basic understanding of what they are. And so when we're making that transition, it makes sense for people to seek out a simple bullet point list of this is what heathenry is about.
Right, and I mean, it also goes to say that, because we've all grown up in that sort of an overculture, the world around us has conditioned us to expect religion to look a certain way. There are things that religions have. Religions have, a god or gods. Religions have a holy book. Religions have commandments. These are just a thing that is expected because of our participation in our indoctrination into the overculture. And I don't say indoctrination in a bad way. It's just a fact of life. It's how anybody grows up is indoctrinated into some culture or another. This is the same reason that you often have people that will treat the sagas or the Eddas as though they're holy books, when all they are sources on our past. But yeah, this is the same thing that leads people to write things like the Nine Noble Virtues and to want and expect things like the Nine Noble Virtues.
And I'll also say, when you are trying to do interfaith work, and because we discussed earlier tonight about in-reach ministries, when you're talking about working with chaplains at prisons and hospitals, mental health facilities, you're dealing with people who their idea of what religion should look like is very Christian oriented. And so sometimes being able to say, well, look, this is what we believe, is a good way to kind of just have that out there and put it in front of them and give them something they can, for lack of a better word, touch. And something say, oh, okay, well, this is not evil devil worship.
Right.
I think it's also actually had a really important point to make, and I lost it. So continue.
We're really on the ball tonight.
We are.
The idea of having a short and sweet elevator pitch for anything is not necessarily bad, but I think, and this is my opinion, that we need to make sure that what we're doing is representative and it's not problematic. I like that word, problematic.
Well, so this does lead into, and I think it might be time to get into this, is
yes.
One of the issues I've had when I was doing this research, and every time I've seen someone pop up with, well, that's not in the Nine Noble Virtues, is when I look at this list, there are some very good basic virtues, if you want to call them, enumerated here. Truth is a good thing. It's vague. The list is, as I've scribbled on all of my notes, it's vagary. Everything is just a bullet point. It doesn't actually get into what we mean when we say a heathen has courage, or a heathen tells the truth, or any of those things, and it ends up, you run the risk of promoting either the toxic brosatru attitudes, or just very shallow, surface level, never actually changing your worldview heathenry.
Well, I would say that you look at it and it tries to say much while saying almost nothing. And we compared it earlier to the Ten Commandments, but one key difference here that makes it a list that cannot ever serve that same purpose is that they're not commandments and they're not specific. All of the Ten Commandments are specific. They're telling you something that you will or will not do. These are single words or three-word combinations to say either this is a good thing or this is better than this, without actually giving you any real information on what the hell it is talking about. And one of the key arguments against even having a list like this in heathenry that I have said many times before is that the first thing that any person will do when presented with a list of rules or laws is try to find out how to lawyer their way around them.
Spoken like a true gamer.
But, I mean, that's just how it is, whether you're gaming isn't. Yeah, absolutely true. You're going to try to find the best advantage for yourself in any system of rules. And, if you see some gain for yourself in a way that might kind of not really go with the 9 Noble Virtues, but if I look at it this way, I'm not really lying now, am I? I'm not failing to tell the truth here. I'm just not telling all of it. Or any other number of ways you can get around it.
And I kind of want to Kanye you here a little bit. So I'm going to let you finish. But
did I drop the best album ever?
I think another important point, and Lauren, I'd love to hear your take on this, is that the 9 Noble Virtues without a heathen worldview behind them mean even less than they do if you know what they're supposed to mean.
Well,
if you can't think like a heathen, then saying courage is good means nothing.
Well, and let me also throw out here to you guys the fact that the level of toxicity that can be brought up by the 9 Noble Virtues being the great heathen morality code drives a lot of good heathens out of heathenry. And it drove me out of heathenry for a while because that, as a woman, as someone who's disabled, there was all this physical might and, oh, well, you can't work a full-time job, you have no meaning because industriousness. It just leads to, I think, decisions that run very counter to that which is good for the tribe is good. And it really runs into, when you look at, the different types of ethics that we tend to have, I would argue that a heathen worldview is consequentialism. The right and wrongness of an act is based on the outcome of the act itself. Whereas what I do, the right or wrongness to a great degree has to do with how it affects my tribe.
So, I mean, I don't mean, am I interrupting you?
No.
I was going to say that some of the points we're starting to touch on now sound an awful lot like it might be time to start digging into them as individual points.
Well, I want to kind of give this kind of broad thing first.
Okay.
The 9 Noble Virtues to me fall more under either virtue ethics, or even sometimes people push it over into deontology. But the idea is that your character, your virtue, your right and wrong is solely determined by your ability to adhere to these virtues or to these rules. And that's just not, just from an overall point of view, that is really, in my opinion, kind of antithesis to a heathen worldview. I'm sorry, I had to break out something I learned in my ethics class.
So, on that note, if we're going to start dissecting these, we should probably go ahead and let people know that because there are several different lists, we might end up covering the same points from a different perspective. So if we're going to cover the bullet point list of the Edenic Rite and say, okay, let's start out with courage, and where does that come from? And why is just saying courage is a virtue not complete? Then we're also going to jump over to the AFA's strength is better than weakness and cover the weaknesses of that particular virtue.
Yes. So we're going to try to keep this orderly, but it probably won't be.
Well, and I can say that the two lists do not necessarily translate back to each other one-to-one.
No.
And in a lot of ways they translate but are in different orders, so we might jump around on the orders of which ones we're talking about a little bit. So if anybody out there is trying to follow along on their handy-dandy pocket list of the 9 Noble Virtues, please understand we're going to do the best we can.
Don't joke, they make those.
Oh, they do, and they...
No, please don't continue. Please don't.
All right,
I bet it would make a nice bookmark for your pocket, have them all.
I was hoping you weren't going to mention that those existed too.
I kind of want one, just because then I can feel like a heathen Jehovah's Witness.
I mean, do they make them with the powder blue or the pink faux leather covers?
No,
so
no.
that,
Before we derail,
I
I'm
just
going to
wanna-
drag us kicking and
Yes.
screaming back to this.
Most of the ones I've seen are camouflage.
Lauren,
I'm going to say that. dang
don't
it.
encourage him. So, Torrent,
yes.
Oh.
if we start out with the first virtue on the Edenic Rites list, courage. It's one word. It's all they give you. Courage.
What the hell
Now-
does that even mean?
I know that they gleaned these from reading the sagas and the Eddas, and
I
taking
would
a look
argue
at the,
that they took a lot of it from the Havamal.
Fair enough. They tried to distill these down, and since you're the only one who's had military service, and people tend to think of courage with the military, give me your take. What is the weakness of this particular bullet point?
That it means nothing out of context.
Thank you.
It means nothing without a situation to apply it to, and it is not something that you can aspire to. If, in my personal opinion, there are a lot of people that would disagree with me, but courageousness is an in-the-moment thing. It either happens or it doesn't, and you really can't train yourself for it.
People are, I mean, even now, a good example on Facebook, and I'm not trying to bring anything else in here, but there were these memes going back and forth when people were talking about Caitlyn Jenner being courageous, and then somebody would post it, oh no, that's not courage, a soldier is courage, and basically people now can't even tell you what courage really is.
Right, and this really brings me back to what we were talking about earlier with the hardcore vagary that goes on in the 9 Noble Virtues. It makes it really hard to deal with. It reminds me an awful lot of a subset of heathenry that still of the people that follow the Ragnarok battle as a part of their theology and the idea of getting into Valhalla as a warrior. They will talk about how a person can courageously fight cancer and then get into Valhalla because they're a warrior. This is every bit the kind of vagary that leads to that kind of idea.
I fought constipation once. I'm going to Valhalla.
All right, so on that vein, right? The AFA has courage is better than cowardice. Now, for me, this is kind of a no shit statement.
Right.
I disagree with you guys.
Fair enough.
Because there may be times where not engaging, where quote-unquote being a coward is the better option for your tribe than trying to show how big and bad you are by picking a fight.
Well, now,
But
when
in
I
that
say
case-
no shit statement, I want to be clear here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that standing and fighting is always the best choice. I am saying that courage is typically the honorable choice over cowardice. Now, this comes into the worldview thing, and I think Torrent will back me on this. A heathen does what is best for their tribe, regardless of what is best for them. And showing personal courage is usually best for yourself, but not always best for your people.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, think about a situation where, just to throw one out there, and I'm not even going to necessarily give you an answer to this scenario, but there could be a scenario where you have been insulted, and to respond to that insult is to put your tribe, your family at war with a family that is going to destroy you. So where's the courageous action there? Are you a coward for backing down from the insult and sparing your family destruction? Or are you a coward if you can't back down from it? This is the kind of vagary we're talking about, and how and also saying that courage is an in-the-moment thing. There are decisions to be made from point to point to point. Now, while I say that, I can also speak to the idea of, how at least the version that the Asatru Folk Assembly puts out is a little bit more clear than just courage, and that courage is better than cowardice, and that when you're faced with those two choices, that the courageous choice is going to be better than the choice of the coward. But you're still left with absolutely no way of determining which is which.
Exactly. I'm there with you. And this is another one of those right here, courage is better than cowardice, that feeds into that Viking true toxic masculinity crap that I see as such a huge issue in heathenry, especially in my neck of the woods, where heathenry is more conservative, and it becomes a rah-rah, we're going to beat you up, get drunk. And that I think that one right there especially is just, that one right there just really hits me. That one just really kind of pokes at me.
Well, since we're poking at you, I'm going to jump to the first one on the AFA's list, which doesn't actually make a by-name appearance in the OR list. And strength is better than weakness. For me, this isn't just vagary. It's honestly, it disregards what it means to be a community. In my opinion, every single person has strengths. We all have weaknesses. I know my weaknesses, I know my strengths, and ideally I should know my brother's weaknesses and strengths. His strengths aren't better than his weaknesses. They are part of the sum total of who he is. And when you qualify one as better than the other in this blanket statement, you end up with people who forget that even a lame man can ride a horse.
Once again, something else that you're gonna get Lauren all riled up about. Okay, there's some vagary here. Strength. Okay, I may not be physically the strongest person on the face of the earth. I may be, a lot of people would consider me physically weak, and that's fine, whatever. But strength, it comes in so many different places, whereas I guarantee you there's a lot of people out there who couldn't put up with going blind like I have. And it's just, but yet that, there's such a discount of strength sometimes. Well, that's strength and this isn't. And once again, because you talk about weakness, there's this push of physical strength over other types of strength of character, willpower, and that, it's ableist bullcrap. Oh, come on, you knew I was going to get that at least once tonight.
I knew that word was coming.
Word drop is coming from Lauren.
Oh no, that Lauren never brings that stuff up. I feel like it also is, I would even argue that the concept of strength is better than weakness is also sexist. Because inherently, because of men's body anatomy, men tend to, if you put a man and a woman of basically the same height and weight, the men tend to have more muscle mass where the women tend to have more boobs.
So now that you've covered that, explain to us why it's racist as well.
Oh, I mean, did we really have to go there?
I did. It's.
Why is it that one? I don't know, but we'll get there. I've already.
I'm sorry, Lauren. I was being a raging shitlord.
You are. I just find that I find that, especially when we look at the AFA stuff, it's so white man oriented. And I get it, heathenry, Norse, whatever, but God, it's just like I read it and I'm like, it's like comic book Viking, just like bad Viking movies. I feel like I need to like drink heavily to truly try to understand it.
I agree with you.
Fair.
I mean, it really does read like somebody has just asked Conan what is best in life.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
And I think that's going to be one of our big problems with a lot of these on the list is they do feed into that Viking true, that Brosa true mentality, that drink the ale, smash the glass against the wall, and grab a horn. It's go lift some weights while you're waiting for the new keg to come in.
So, as we move through these, right, we've established that vagary is an issue.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want to continue to beat that particular horse to death.
Okay, so let's just say that
but I do
all
have
of
to
these
beat
are
that
vague.
horse. Okay, so on honor, I feel like there's a legitimate horse to beat on vagary with the word honor, because if you look at, we have honor, we have that word, and then if you look at I don't have to check my notes because I don't have all of them here. I don't know all of them. There are 4 different words in Old Norse that mean honor that have differences between each word. So when you bring up honor, which one are you talking about? What are you talking about? Are you talking about honor as it comes to integrity? Are you talking about honor as it comes to I don't know my Old Norse as well as I used to. So
I do want to say here that when you begin to kind of digest that heathen mindset, right, and become more and more heathen, you begin to see that what is honorable is that which is expected and accepted by your tribe, by your people.
Right.
And so the vagary here, I think, takes that twist of, it doesn't actually say that honor is good because it is expected. It just says honor, or as the AFA puts it, honor is better than dishonor, and it completely removes your own agency from the decision of, or from the decision of your people.
Now, if I can, I think both of you are completely missing the point on this one.
Okay.
Now, I could be
disagreeing. What?
I could be entirely wrong. I could be allowing too much of a modern theological understanding bleed into this. But one of the things that we all regularly talk about is the difference between words with a capital letter and words with a lowercase letter. And I would argue that this virtue is probably trying to talk about honor with a capital H, which is a very specific concept. It's not a concept that I'm going to beat to death here. We're going to eventually cover it as part of our in-depth series, same as we did Frith. But honor is something of a social currency amongst heathens. And dishonor is, like being in a debt that you don't want to be in. So,
I'm gonna tell you that within the heathen worldview, you're absolutely correct. However, vagary, if I say honor to Brother Bob, the chaplain down at the big bad prison penitentiary, he's not gonna know that, and that kind of kills the whole point of having this list.
Is Big Brother Bob a heathen?
No, he's the chaplain.
And here's the question: were these intended for outsiders?
I don't know.
Well,
some would say yes, and some would say no.
Even beyond that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you what the mindset was of these people because I don't know, but the fact of the matter is, we have to be cognizant that we live in an overculture where words mean things, and new heathens even aren't going to know what honor actually means.
And that's an important point to make. New heathens who are coming into it and all they see is the word honor, and they're going to take what the overculture says is honor and go with that. Which, I mean, America has conflicted, and I'm speaking from America, so I apologize to our international audience, all like 3 of you.
Hi, Marcel.
America has a conflicting relationship with the word honor. And so that makes it difficult for new heathens.
Okay, so here's the question, though, and I have to, try as often as I bash these to defend them, otherwise we're just not being fair. Isn't it the responsibility of the heathen community to educate the new heathens? So they shouldn't be coming at this from such a position of ignorance because there's somebody there to correct them.
Yeah, but let's face it, not everyone has that. Not everyone is fortunate enough not to live in Cascadia. Not everyone's fortunate enough to live in Cascadia, Torrent. And there are lots of people that their introduction to this is going to be reading a website, which there's, if you Google non-noble virtues like critique, there's almost nothing out there. Instead, there's 8 million places where these things are posted, and it makes it look like it has this, full heathen support. And if you're just, you're learning and new and don't have that community yet, once again, over 10 years of buying into it. So
you could say that, at least in the case of this particular virtue, that the problem is less the virtue itself and more that heathens are coming up without being taught the worldview to understand it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I concur with that.
Okay. So, do we have anything more to say about that one in particular, or should we move on?
I think we're good.
So, this next virtue, and I kind of want to jump over to the AFA list here because we've kind of skipped around a bit. This one kind of got my bonnet in a twist.
Now you have to wear a bonnet.
You do.
Or I'm just going to picture it a lot.
You do. That has to happen at Cascadia Moot.
You bring a bonnet, I will wear it the entire moot.
Dude, if we can raise, how about this? If we raise the money before y'all pick a date, you will wear a bonnet at Cascadia Moot.
Fair enough.
Okay.
And I know just the seamstress to make it. Okay, moving on.
I've got one. Come on.
Moving on.
Uh-huh.
Joy is better than guilt.
Yeah,
now,
that one bothers me.
So I want to point out here that heathenry isn't... We aren't a guilt culture. And I think it's important. That's a very important distinction. We may have social shame, especially tribal shaming, where if you don't keep your oaths, there is that shame involvement. But guilt is a state for a heathen, not an emotion. Guilt is you are guilty. You did something wrong. That is your guilt.
And I would argue
you feel shame.
I would argue that guilt has a purpose. Guilt has a, it's something that, and also I think it's also putting up unreal expectations that you should be happy all the time. Because that's just not going to happen, and then you feel guilty because you're not happy all the time.
And I would say that on top of both of those, the idea that joy is better than guilt is like comparing apples to oranges. The two concepts have very little to do with each other in a heathen context.
Well, and that was going to be my next point, is up to this point, at least in the AFA list, they've set you up to a dichotomy. You have strength, weakness, courage, cowardice, and then out of left field you get joy is better than guilt, and the two aren't related.
Now I'm gonna try to think a second in kind of the frame of mind that people might have been in when they put together this list. It is that they were trying to make a very counterculture statement there.
Absolutely. I can definitely see that. Well, I mean, it should be pointed out that we, as we mentioned earlier, I was born a Christian or raised a Christian, so were you. the Abrahamic faiths are a guilt culture, whereas the heathen culture is a shame culture. In a shame culture, in order to just to put a quick face on what we're talking about here, in a shame culture, you gain your idea of what is right and what is wrong from the reactions of your tribe, from the people around you. When you do right, you are praised. When you do wrong, you are shamed. In a guilt culture, you are expected to internalize that. You are supposed to be the one that is passing that judgment on yourself. And you pass that judgment by taking in the ideals of the culture that you're in. And this is also key to the difference between, as we mentioned before, the orthopraxic religion like we are, which is based on correct action, versus the orthodoxic, which is right belief. So the entire concept behind a guilt culture is that you have violated your belief internally, therefore you must feel this internal guilt. So I could definitely see, as Lauren was saying, that this could be a reaction of the heathens at the time that this was written, trying to push people out of that guilt culture and saying that don't be guilty, don't feel guilty inside because you are something other than what the overculture says you should be. But if that is true, and that's the only way I can see this virtue as being something that I would describe as a virtue, it's something that had a useful time period, and that useful time period is long past.
I think that was a perfect point to make on that, is whatever value that had in distancing ourselves from the overculture has passed. We're no longer at that point, and we need to start actually teaching new heathens how to think like a heathen.
Right.
So, moving on, because we are really, really wordy for being as out of it as we are.
That may be why.
I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to list off a few here, and I want to tackle these as a group because they seem to kind of fit together.
Okay.
So we have, on the OR side of things, we have fidelity, hospitality, and then those would tie into honor and even discipline, in my opinion. So when you list those off all as one, right, you got honor, fidelity, discipline, hospitality. Hospitality, for sure, is something that we stress all the time as heathens. It's just kind of who we are, right?
Right. But once again, hospitality at the expense of your tribe is bad.
So when we look at these, just kind of as a group, Torrent, when we talk about discipline, hospitality, and fidelity, what are we missing just from the bullet points? Real quick, though.
I'm really at a loss as to where you're going with that. I can see definitely how they fit together. Now, what they might be missing from their bullet points is, the context. But
well, that's what I mean. What is the context that we need to really get where they're going with this, and thus why do these particular bullet points just kind of fall short as a virtue?
You're trying to feed me, and I'm just, the airplane's missing the hangar, brother.
Let me.
Let's try this again.
We have just revealed how tired we are. All right, Torrent and Lauren, interrupt him if he can't figure out what I'm saying here. Hospitality as a one-word thing. It's missing context.
Yeah.
What does it mean to a heathen to be
there.
Hospitable?
Okay. I mean, sure. I thought we had passed beyond mentioning the context. Sorry, that's my bad. I was completely missing that. In a heathen context, I mean, hospitality is kind of a given. I have a hard time with that one myself, just because for me it is such a given. It is just it's a state of being. It's how you are. You are hospitable. When the stranger or the non-family member comes to your door, you bring them in, you offer a drink, you offer a place to sit, you offer a bite to eat if they need it. You don't turn somebody away unless you need to turn them away to protect yourself. I've had long conversations with people about this concept, the idea that when it comes to hospitality, it's an arrangement between two people, if that makes sense. Trying to get all my thoughts into one place on this one.
Well, it's an arrangement between, and the most
host and guest.
Guest and host. I recently hosted a friend and her fiance, and I remember talking to you about it and saying it was an expensive trip for them to make, and it was expensive for me to host them, but I did it because it was right.
Right,
not because I was obligated on some cosmic level, but because that's what heathens do. Is we are hospitable.
Right, and you kind of, if you'll excuse me, especially being as wrung out as we are right now, there's certain things that once you've been doing it long enough become very hard to actually describe because they've been so thoroughly ingrained in your worldview and your actions.
Absolutely.
But it's important to remember hospitality, as we said, is an arrangement between host and guest, and part of this that I think will be important, that it's a bit of context that's definitely going to be missing from just about anybody when it comes to hospitality, is that the natural state between strangers is suspicion. The natural state is distrust, and hospitality is predicated on the idea of overcoming the initial distrust. This is a bit of huge context that's missing from it as it's listed in the various 9 Noble Virtues lists.
Well, I think that's context that's missing just in our modern lives, even.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a lot of the context that we're discussing. It's missing from all of this stuff is the idea that there is a heathen way of thinking. That context is completely missing from the overculture, and therefore it's missing from the new heathen, and therefore it's missing from this list if it's something that's expected to be understood by new heathens.
I would argue that sometimes it's missing by people who've been heathen for a long time.
Well, as one of our guests said a couple weeks back, if you don't look back on your heathenry from 5 years ago and
cringe,
you're not doing
that.
It right.
That will be Toby.
Yeah, Yeah.
So I'm going to push us right along, right through here, because we are way taking our time with this.
Yes, we are.
There's some AFA ones that I want to get to, and the last one I want to touch on is really important, so I want to get through these as quick as we can. There's realism is better than dogmatism.
I can't even begin to understand where they were going with that one.
Yeah, that one I just go, that's nice.
I mean,
bless your heart.
They're not on the same spectrum.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
Bless your heart. That's all I got to say to that one.
If we have a guest that can explain that one, feel free to, I'm sorry, not a guest, a listener can explain that one. Feel free to write in. Our producer will get your opinion on that to us so that at least we can have something to talk about on it.
Yeah.
So, moving right along then, since none of us really know how to approach that, another bullet point, self-reliance. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this one here.
Yeah.
And there is a valid place for self-reliance, and it isn't where most people take this particular virtue. Self-reliance is good so that you are less of a burden on your tribe, so that your tribe can take care of the people who need it. If you don't need to be taken care of, then you need to step up and take care of yourself so that those who do need to be taken care of can be taken care of.
Right. I mean, this has been, when I talk to people, and we're in a brief conversation, and it comes up that I dislike the 9 Noble Virtues, and I get the why question because they don't understand it. That one right there is always the one I go to first. Self-reliance is the worst one on the list, the biggest offender, because it feeds into this Victorian ideal of the lone warrior Viking that can take care of himself and doesn't need anybody, and that is the most antithetical thing to heathen worldview that is on the entire freaking list.
Also,
And-
just want to point out
and no
that
offe-
historical
no off-
bullcrap.
Yeah, no offense to anyone who's an actual cowboy, but that comes to mind to me as cowboy heathenry. It is that idealized version of the Old West cowboy on the range that don't need nobody. And that just, you talking about something.
Yeah.
That's what, but that right there is what got me from, 9 Noble Virtues are good, they're okay, to, God, what was I thinking?
So, pushing right along here.
Yes.
We've got a few more to get to, and then we got some questions to answer.
So if you have questions, get them to our producer.
This one is a little bit more on that dichotomy level here, but is still just vague enough that it made me go, what are you talking about? Vigor is better than lifelessness. And I would assume that that feeds into the perseverance from the Odinic rights list.
Yeah, or possibly industriousness, or a combination of the two.
I can't even.
No, I mean,
I'm just.
I kind of get what they're saying. Like, you should be...
don't just sit on your ass watching life pass you by.
Right. But the way it's phrased is just utterly confusing, because it's another one of those... First I gotta go look up vigor if I don't know what it means, and then I gotta,
This is another one of those where I think is problematic, and it comes to devaluing people who can't contribute as much physically, and that's when that once again doesn't really fit with the worldview, in my opinion.
Well, and I think ideally this one wouldn't devalue anyone. I think it could be phrased better with the phrase I've used and I've seen used of, we are a world-accepting culture. Live this life to the fullest that you have the ability to live it, because we don't know what's next, if there is anything that's next.
Right, and I can easily see some of the things they could have pulled from the Sagas and the Eddas that could have led to that one as a virtue. I mean, even things straight out of the Havamal that are pretty clearly stated, which would also lead back into the one about cowardice. But the fact goes back to the idea that it really does feed again into that lone wolf heathen, I don't need nobody and I ain't afraid of nothing mentality that is absolute bullcrap and is a problem.
Well, and here's my thought on it was just the fact that you and I interpret it differently, Josh. That we read that and see two completely different statements is right there fundamentally enough that why it's problematic. Because I read that as big, strong men are better than, being physically brawny. I go back to that strength is better than weakness. To me, it's just a restating of that, in a way.
So, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to curtail this one, because there's no way we can cover all of this in 90 minutes.
Man, Josh is cracking the whip tonight.
Yeah, he really is.
I told you I was the boss earlier this week, and I'm...
You're not the boss of me!
On this I am.
Okay.
So, this one is one, and I have to thank Torrent and Toby for this. They really tempered my attitude on it and made me take a second look and figure out what happened. I mentioned earlier I didn't jump on this bandwagon of the 9 Noble Virtues when I started out in heathenry. So when I went to look this up, I just went to Wikipedia because internet. And I found a list of the 9 Noble Virtues. And one of them had me royally pissed off. And Torrent had to make me take a second look and be like, where did this come from? The original virtue, as listed on the AFA's blog, is ancestry is better than rootlessness, which again is an exercise in vagary, and is problematic in and of itself, as you pointed out, Torrent. But on the Wikipedia, and I don't know who edited this, but the way they worded it was ancestry is better than universalism. And I have to, whoever did that, what we're calling a ninja edit, I have to call you out to the carpet, because that is couching a political statement and a religious virtue, and it is dangerous, irresponsible, and frankly, borderline malicious.
Tell us how you really feel.
Well, you can tell I was angry because I got real quiet and serious.
Yeah.
Well,
Actually,
no,
I'm trying to find out who actually. I'm looking at the actual edits for that Wikipedia page and seeing who did it.
Well, I was going to say one of the reasons we did want to bring this up is that I'm sure and I'm hoping that there is at least one listener out there who is affiliated with the AFA who can explore this with their leadership and figure out exactly where it came from and what happened. Because obviously this is not the virtue number 9 that is on the list that appears on the AFA's website. This is something that seems to exist only on Wikipedia. And people are out there getting the wrong idea. Obviously, Josh got the wrong idea, and it put him in a bad place. So if you guys want to figure that one out on your own and figure out which one's correct and get in there and get something edited, that would probably be a great idea.
Well, and I just want to, clear it up for those who are new and don't understand that sets up a dichotomy between the universalist position, which is a position that many heathens take issue with, and ancestry. And I have I might even do a blog post on this. Even the universalist heathens will place importance on who their ancestors worshipped. It's so important to who heathens are that even universalists can't get away from it. So to pit the two against each other is to pull you can't be a real heathen because you're X.
Right,
Now,
it's simply an exercise in no true Scotsman.
Well, I do want to say that from what the research that I have done, that that last one was the also true free assemblies version, which was changed by the Austrian for the Austrian folk assemblies version is different. So then since the free assembly is an incredibly an organization that hasn't been around in over 30 years.
Well,
yeah.
I've got the AFA blog pulled up, and they very clearly state that this list that ends in ancestry is better than rootlessness.
Yeah.
Is from the Austrian Free Assembly, which they credit as their predecessor.
Then
so again, according to the Wikipedia, it's a totally different thing, and I don't know where it came from.
So in that case, let's go ahead and say that we've said to the AFA heathens out there that Wikipedia is listing that one as your particular version. If that is the correct one, then that should probably be reflected on your AFA page. If it's not, you might want to figure out how to correct that ninja edit on Wikipedia. And from there, I think we should move on to actually critiquing the one that was officially put out by the AFA.
Which is, ancestry is better than rootlessness. I've already talked enough. I'm going to let you two take it. Keep in mind, we've got 2 questions to get to, and it is 8:08.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and say that, well, duh. I mean, from a heathen perspective, we are an ancestor-worshipping religion, so any idea of trying to eschew your ancestry from your praxis is just, stupid. It's like saying, it's like making breathing a noble virtue. It doesn't make any damn sense to even include it on the list.
I'm pretty much in the same place. It's just, duh. I mean, if you don't understand that as a heathen, that's like remedial heathenry.
It's kind of the closest I'll ever become to, trying to make that no true Scotsman argument and say, bro, you're not a heathen. If you're okay with completely devaluing ancestry. But, again, we go back to that whole concept of these are going to be things that when people are getting interested in heathenry and trying to turn themselves into a heathen without having the benefit of anybody to learn from, they're going to be doing internet searches and they're going to find references to the 9 Noble Virtues and they're going to Google that and they're going to come to these lists. And again, this is another spot where this is basic stuff that you should be being taught by people. And I think a lot of what the thrust of this episode comes around to is that once upon a time somebody was trying to create something that would give heathens a basic set of values to live from. That is probably was a noble quest. But that doesn't necessarily mean it was doable. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they got it right when they did it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I completely get that. And, you know, we should probably at some point do an episode on ancestor worship and veneration.
Yes.
Absolutely. You know, if we're trying to be the heathens that are trying to teach people. Which, you know, is much hubris is couched in that statement, we kind of are.
Yeah.
So, are we ready to get to some questions?
Sure. Lauren, go ahead and read that first question. I've got to step away for just a second, so
Sure.
you guys take it.
First question obviously comes from our friend who is doing the moot to replace Lightning Across the Plains. How does one accomplish moving from guilt as an emotion to guilt as a state? Or more broadly, in what can someone do to help themselves move to a more heathen worldview? Well, I have an answer on the top one. Is you, to some degree, it is about just reminding yourself. It's to go on a very, you know, kind of cognitive behavioral therapy bent here. Just when you catch yourself in that state, just reminding yourself that, hey, this is not true. This is not real. This is not what you want. And that's really the best way you can change any emotion, because your emotions and your thoughts and behaviors all influence each other. So if you can change your thoughts and behaviors, it'll change your emotions.
Right. So I would probably expand on that by saying that what you need to do with guilt is to first examine the source of your guilt. And once you figure out why you have it, you act upon it. And once you turn guilt into a motivation, an actionable force, it just becomes a state that you're in rather than an emotion that you feel. Because it becomes an equation, if you will. You say, you have this, if you add this, you get this, if that makes sense. So if you have this state of guilt, and you realize the reason you have it is this other factor, correct that factor, guilt goes away. That's the idea that you have there, and that takes it from being an emotion to a state, and an actionable state at that. As far as the second part of the question, you know, moving towards a more heathen worldview is much easier and more complicated at the same time, because it's all about reinforcement. It's something that takes you years, decades, lifetimes to accomplish, because we are born into and indoctrinated into a certain worldview, and to try later in our lives, whether as teenagers or adults, to try to shift that is very difficult. It's the same concept as learning a new language, which you essentially are. You're trying to load a whole new operating system into your brain, a whole new way of looking at life and thinking about things. So you can't expect that to be quick or easy, but it's mainly through force of repetition. You know, examine yourself constantly. Look at how you're thinking about things and reacting to things. If it's in conflict with what is the heathen worldview, try to correct yourself, and eventually you'll be doing it the correct way.
I think that is definitely on the right track. And we will be doing a show on Worldview coming up. We are working on it, but that's a pretty big one to tackle.
Yeah.
All right, so what is our next question?
Our next question comes from the same person, because he's also been asking questions. And that has to do with hospitality. How does one deal with a member of a household who is less hospitable? How do you reconcile being hospitable with them being unwilling to when they're an equal part of the household?
So,
Well,
I think I want to start out here. If you were in a guest situation where you've been invited into someone's home, be hospitable. Period. End of story. That doesn't mean you have to take abuse if someone is abusing you while you're a guest in this house, mention it to the host or leave. But do not break that. What is the word I'm looking for?
Bargain?
Do not. Yeah, well.
Yeah, it's not the correct word, but it's close to my brain could come. Contract.
Yes.
Don't break the contract. Don't go outside of the boundaries of that guest-host relationship. Your job is to be hospitable. Sometimes that puts us in difficult situations, and that is why it is very important to the heathen to tailor and be careful who they're entering into a gift cycle with, or who they're guesting or hosting, because we have to consider what kind of situations that's going to put us into.
Exactly. Now, I want to kind of go to his comment about you're sharing a household with someone. Well, I mean, you're if it's someone who's family or someone you consider your tribe, your kin, then you've got to look at what's better, what's going to be the best thing for your kin. And you've got to look at that first. And I think that is, but otherwise, be considerate, but don't necessarily be, if you're going to invite people over and you're sharing a house, take them to your room and entertain them in there, or, entertain them elsewhere. Try to be considerate, but don't totally give it up on it just because someone else doesn't like it.
Well, I would say that you have to look at the fact that obviously you guys have two different definitions of hospitality, but you have to share some living space, so try to figure out exactly where those ideas of hospitality differ from each other and just talk about it. I mean, you're living with this person. You need to be able to communicate with them and make them realize that while their issue is the fact that you're impacting their comfort, that this is a huge issue, a huge deal to you, and they are just as equally impacting your comfort. And people don't necessarily realize that. I've seen a lot of people that have been in shared living situations that just kind of go into that whole, they're inviting people over, having a gathering is going to impact my comfort, but me denying that can't possibly impact their comfort because I'm not intruding into their living space. But you got to make them realize they are. They're intruding into who you are as a person, and talk to them about that. You got to deal with, to a certain amount, the fact that you are living with another person and you have to adapt to their view of the world as much as they have to adapt to yours. Just make sure that you're not being walked on in the process, is all I can really say to that.
I would also, I mentioned recently that I hosted a couple of friends here, and then I had another friend stay briefly just one night, and I have a roommate, and she's not a heathen, and she's very much antisocial. She doesn't like people. And I had to both inform her that there was someone going to be here, but also be like, I need to make sure this is okay because this is my living space.
Right, that's completely reasonable.
Share it with her. At the same time, the thing I had to do that was most important was I had to be here. If you have guests and they are extended guests, like if you have a guest who's staying 3 days, you're going to need to take time off and be here for your guests so that your roommate or your non-heathen family member who isn't necessarily as hospitable as you isn't having to play host. You cannot set them up for failure in that process.
And I have to say that as far as trying to compare this situation like that to, that's a modern concept that our ancestors never really would have had to deal with. Our ancestors would have had a concept of head of house. And that's where your answer would lie. What does the head of the house say? Well, that's apparently how it's going to be because that's just how it is. But if I had to try to come up with an analogy or a way to cross it over to a more ancient worldview, is the idea of you and your roommates aren't family. You're neighbors. You're sharing an area, but it might not be any different than, being next door neighbors to somebody in a different way of looking at it. And, when you're hosting somebody and you're going to have a loud party in your backyard, you're going to let your neighbors know, and if they have a problem with that loud party, you're going to tone it down a little bit because you have to deal with that, and that's part of keeping, the peace in your area.
Now, I will say that I am married to someone who is an atheist, and he's rather antisocial. He's a self-proclaimed misanthrope, and so that can be, I've just had to explain to him, this is important to me, and he goes and hides in his man cave, and I have my heathen friends over, and we reached a nice compromise. But I definitely want to reiterate being sure to say, this is important to me. This is something that is very important to me, and being able to communicate that and say that, a lot of times that goes a lot further than you think.
Right, as long as you don't overuse the concept.
Right.
Well, and that comes into being part of being hospitable, and playing into your neighbor's analogy, Torrent, is you have to set your boundaries with your roommate or your neighbor and be like, this is who I am, and that's not going to change. But you can't abuse those boundaries. You can't just say, well, I'm heathen, so I'm going to drink, a 2-liter horn of meat every day, and you're just going to have to put up with my drunk ass. That's not being hospitable.
I do what I want.
And that would be the problem.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I know more than one person who has used heathenry as an excuse to feed their alcoholism. So, yeah.
And those people are despicable.
Yeah.
Or to not shave their beard in prison. Sorry, that was a news article that was filtered on the heathen sphere.
I didn't read it. I saw it, but I didn't read it.
I've been too busy to even see anything lately. It's just been nutty at this time of year right now with school. It's just nutty.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely you got to be practical on some level.
So,
at the same time.
We do have 2 filler questions there, but I want to hold off on those because I think maybe we may have to do, maybe for episode 10, a get to know the hosts episode where we just tell you who we are, what we like to drink, what we like to eat, and why in the world we decided to put ourselves through this hell that is podcasting.
Oh, you're saying we get to be lazy next week?
Yes!
I'm calling it.
Yes. Josh, you're my favorite person tonight.
I, for one, support this plan.
Especially considering we do have for those of us in the U.S. do have a holiday weekend coming up. And quite frankly, I have a test next Wednesday I have to study for.
So, in the meantime, though, I do have some things I want to talk about as far as the podcast, Cascadia Moot, and what we're planning on doing with Heathen Talk as a entity.
Yes.
So I did talk to you guys earlier this week, and just so the listeners know, we are planning on launching an audio book series where I'm actually going to record Culture of the Teutons and upload it so that you can listen to it on your drive to work, or if you can't read because you're blind like Lauren, or for any other reason you'd rather just listen to the book than read that heady tome, you can listen to my smooth jazz announcer voice read it to you.
And I also want to say within that, one of my projects, which is the Accessible Heathenry Project, we're also, if you are visually impaired, we're also trying to get almost every public domain heathenry thing that we can get our hands on converted over to plain text so that you can use things like VBooks or Dream Voice, or a reader to actually listen to it if you have reading difficulties or just don't like to read, for things that aren't audiobooked. And
beyond that, as far as Heathen Talk as a brand and entity, we want to do T-shirts, and if you are interested in T-shirts, let us know. And I'm going to be straight up with you here. We want to make some money off of that so that we can buy Torrent a good headset, so that we can have a decent setup, so that maybe we can even get Mark to be involved in the actual episode.
Or maybe so that we can cover the hosting bill.
That is probably the most important part of this.
Priorities, Lauren. Priorities.
Come on, guys.
We don't want to make $1 million a year. Well, we do want to make $1 million a year, but we're being realistic here. We're not going to make $1 million a year off of the 300 people who watch and listen to our podcast.
But if we made $20-30 a month, it'd be great.
Exactly. And so we want to put together a T-shirt. We want you to buy that T-shirt, and we want you to give us ideas of what else you want. If you want us to do a different book for an audiobook, let me know. I'll read it.
I should point out that one of the T-shirt designs that we had kicked around based on some of our user feedback was to have an artist turn me into a My Little Pony and say, Torrent is magic. So if you would like me as a My Little Pony to wear around in public and let everybody see it, this is the best way you're ever going to be able to do it.
And let's face it, our Heathen Talk logo that we have is really awesome. And I'm not just saying that because my atheist brother designed it for us.
It's a really good logo.
I know, the atheists are useful.
He is a design professional, so he very kindly donated his time and energy to making that for us. And we'll put it on a T-shirt. We'll put it on a mouse pad. Do people use mouse pads anymore? We'll put it on a water bottle. We'll put it on. I bet we could probably even get it on those like plastic horns. You know the ones I'm talking about. The plastic drinking horns.
I
interrupt here for a second. Etheric asked another question that's really important.
Okay.
He asked if we have a PayPal that people can make donations with. We didn't even think about that. I'm straight up with you.
So we will get a PayPal, and we will put it on the website, we'll put it on the website. We'll put it on Facebook. We'll put it everywhere so that you'll see it everywhere. But I'll put a PayPal. We'll get it set up, and I'll put a button on our actual website, which is heathentalk.libsyn.com.
I will point out, this is all that technical stuff that I really do not concern myself with.
We've got 3 minutes left.
3 minutes.
And I just realized, and I need to make this point, if you are registering through Indiegogo, I need you to save, maybe even print out, the email that they send you after you make the donation. That is your receipt. And that is going...
It's
GoFundMe?
Not GoFundMe. It's GoFundMe.
It's GoFundMe.
Yeah, that's the one. Sorry, guys. Through GoFundMe, save the email they send you. Print it out. Bring it with you. And that's going to be one of the things we use to make sure that you are pre-registered so that you can get in and eat delicious food.
Delicious food. So I do want to say real quick before we get into all the sign-off stuff that we are quite aware that we didn't cover this topic nearly as thoroughly as we could have today. This is a topic that, as you saw by how slowly we got into it, could have 2-3 episodes devoted to it. Well, we're not going to do that. I think we've covered our opinion on it, and we've tried to hit the high points on why we do have these issues with the 9 Noble Virtues. We've tried to be fair to them. And we may or may not have changed your opinion on that, but I did want to point out that this was not the sum of it. This was just what we could get to today.
Well, and if you disagree with us, please go to the Facebook page and tell us.
Absolutely.
Tell us why we're wrong.
And it may start some interesting conversations.
And every conversation is a learning opportunity, and that's what we're here for. So I was going to say, that said, remember our announcements at the beginning that we've got Etheric planning a sort of a placeholder to try to get some people somewhere to go that sort of lost out when Lightning on the Plane got canceled. The information for that will be up on the podcast pages. Also, for those of you that happen to be in the Cascadia or the Seattle area, we are holding a pub moot at Brower's Cafe on Saturday in Fremont at 4 o'clock, so come if you can. And more information forthcoming as the weeks go by on Cascadia Moot. If anybody has any specific questions they want to see covered about that before they give their donations and get their tickets, definitely ask them on the Facebook page or any of our other resources so that we can address those and get you comfortable with coming. Absolutely.
Gonna
It
be
is
awesome.
8:30, and Lauren, you're doing it wrong.
Oh, you're not the boss of me.
Actually,
Have a
I
good
am.
night, everybody.
See y'all next week.